The year ahead is not knocking softly. It is standing at the door with a firm hand and a patient heart, asking you a question you have delayed for too long. Will you finally choose yourself? Not in anger, not in selfishness, but in truth. Because there is a difference between loving others deeply and abandoning yourself quietly. And too many of us have mastered the second while calling it virtue. You have been taught to give until you are empty, to smile while your spirit is tired, to be strong even when your bones are asking for rest. You were praised for endurance, rewarded for silence, admired for how much you could carry without breaking. But no one told you that survival is not the same as living, and sacrifice is not holy when it costs you your soul. Putting yourself first in 2026 does not mean you will love less. It means you will love with boundaries. It means you will stop confusing loyalty with self-betrayal. It means you will understand that your life is not a rehearsal, and your time is not an endless river, meant to be poured into cups that never fill. You are allowed to be tired of being everything to everyone while feeling like nothing to yourself. You are allowed to pause and ask why your name is always last on your own list. You are allowed to admit that some of the pain you carry did not come from fate, but from the choices you made trying to keep others comfortable. There is a quiet violence in constantly shrinking yourself, in lowering your voice so others can feel tall, in dimming your light so no one feels threatened, in staying where you are tolerated instead of celebrated. Over time, this violence teaches your spirit to apologize for existing and your dreams to whisper instead of speak. 2026 is asking you to stop apologizing for your needs. Rest is not laziness. Saying no is not cruelty. Walking away is not failure. Choosing peace over chaos is not weakness. It is wisdom earned through wounds and courage shaped by experience. Some people will not recognize you when you begin to put yourself first. They were comfortable with the version of you that overgave, overexplained, and overextended. They benefited from your silence. They counted on your guilt. When you change the rules, when you stop bleeding just to prove you care, they may accuse you of being different. Let them. Growth has always frightened those who profit from your staying small. Understand this clearly. You can be a good person and still disappoint people. You can be kind and still choose distance. You can be loving and still leave what is harming you. Your worth is not measured by how much you endure, but by how honestly you live. Putting yourself first means listening to the quiet voice inside you that has been patient for years. The voice that knows when something is wrong even if you cannot explain it. The voice that tightens your chest in certain rooms and loosens your breath in others. That voice has been guiding you all along, but you were taught to ignore it in favor of approval. In 2026, let your intuition have a seat at the table. Let it speak before fear does. Let it remind you that peace is not found in chaos you have learned to manage, but in environments where you are safe enough to be yourself. There is no medal waiting for you at the end of suffering that was unnecessary. No trophy for staying too long. No applause for loving people who refuse to love you back with the same care. Life does not reward martyrdom the way we were told it would. Life rewards truth. Life rewards alignment. Life rewards the brave decision to stop living at war with yourself. You are not here to be consumed. You are here to experience, to grow, to feel joy without guilt and rest without explanation. You are here to take up space in your own life, not as a visitor, but as a resident with full rights. Some relationships will not survive the version of you that chooses peace. Some conversations will never happen because you will no longer beg to be understood. Some doors will close when you stop knocking. Let them close. What is meant for you will not require you to abandon yourself to enter. Putting yourself first means you stop romanticizing exhaustion. You stop calling stress ambition. You stop confusing anxiety with passion. You stop wearing burnout like a badge of honor. Your body has been speaking to you in aches, in tension, in sleepless nights. It has been asking for gentleness. Listen. It also means forgiving yourself for the times you did not know better, for the boundaries you did not set, for the love you gave to people who could not hold it. You did what you could with what you knew. Shame has no productive place in your future. Compassion does. 2026 is not about becoming someone else. It is about returning to who you were before the world taught you to abandon yourself to survive. Before you learned to measure your value by productivity, usefulness, or approval. Before you mistook being needed for being loved. You do not need permission to choose yourself. You do not need a crisis to justify rest. You do not need to explain your healing to anyone who is uncomfortable with your growth. Your life is reason enough. When you begin to put yourself first, you will notice how much lighter you feel, not because life becomes easy, but because you stop carrying what was never yours to hold. Other people's expectations, other people's moods, other people's unresolved wounds. You will learn that peace is not loud. It does not demand performance. It does not chase validation. Peace is quiet mornings, honest choices, and the courage to walk away from what costs you your sanity. Let 2026 be the year you stop negotiating with your well-being. The year you stop waiting for people to change while you wither. The year you stop explaining your pain to those committed to misunderstanding it. You are allowed to want more joy, more balance, more honesty, more rest. Wanting more does not make you ungrateful. It makes you alive. Putting yourself first will not make you lonely. It will make you selective. And there is a profound difference. Solitude chosen is not emptiness. It is space. Space to hear yourself. Space to heal. Space to grow into the life you have postponed. You have spent years being strong. In 2026, be whole. Strength without tenderness is survival. Wholeness is living. Choose yourself in small ways at first. A boundary spoken calmly. A rest day taken without guilt. A truth acknowledged quietly. Small choices, repeated, become a life. One day you will look back and realize the moment everything changed was not loud. It was the moment you decided you mattered, and that decision will echo through every room you enter, every relationship you build, every dream you dare to honor. Put yourself first in 2026, not because others do not matter, but because you do. And a life that honors itself has more love to give, more light to share, and more truth to stand on. Growth has a way of disturbing the comfort of those who learn to live well inside your silence. When you begin to change, not loudly and not with announcement, but steadily and truthfully, it shifts the balance that once kept others at ease. Your silence was predictable, your endurance was convenient, your willingness to accept less made space for others to take more. When you grow, that unspoken agreement breaks, and the first reaction is often offense disguised as concern. There are people who loved you most when you doubted yourself. They felt secure when you hesitated, when you asked for permission, when you softened your truth so it would land gently in their hands. Your silence made them feel powerful, needed, or superior. It allowed them to avoid their own reflection, because as long as you stayed quiet, no one had to question the arrangement. Growth disrupts that illusion. When you begin to speak with clarity instead of apology, it unsettles those who are comfortable with your confusion. When you stop over-explaining, they feel shut out. When you choose distance instead of endurance, they call it coldness. But what they are really reacting to is the loss of access. Access to your time, your energy, your emotional labor. Your forgiveness without accountability. Silence is often mistaken for peace, but it is usually survival. You were not quiet because you had nothing to say. You were quiet because you learned that speaking came with consequences. You learned that honesty could be punished, that boundaries could be ignored, that expressing your needs might cost you love. So you adapted. You swallowed words. You made yourself smaller. You became skilled at carrying discomfort so others would not have to. Growth begins the moment you stop negotiating your worth. It begins when you realize that being agreeable has cost you more than being honest ever could. And when you step into that realization, those who benefited from your silence feel exposed. They feel challenged, not because you attacked them, but because you stopped protecting them from the truth. Offense is often a mask for insecurity. When someone reacts strongly to your growth, it is rarely about you becoming worse. It is about you becoming harder to control. Your confidence interrupts their narrative. Your boundaries remove their leverage. Your healing highlights what they avoided healing in themselves. You may notice that some people rewrite history when you grow. They remind you of who you used to be, as if your past obedience should disqualify your present clarity. They accuse you of changing, as though change were a betrayal instead of a natural response to awareness. They may frame your growth as selfishness, because selflessness once worked in their favor. There is grief in this process, not because you were wrong to grow, but because you see clearly how conditional some connections were, how love was tied to your silence, how support was offered only as long as you did not outgrow the role you were assigned. This realization can hurt deeply, but it is also freeing, because it shows you what was real and what was merely convenient. Your growth does not require permission. It does not need consensus. It does not need to be understood by those who refuse to understand themselves. You are not responsible for maintaining relationships that depend on your self-erasure. You are not obligated to stay quiet so others can stay comfortable. As you grow, your voice may tremble at first, not because it is weak, but because it is unused. Silence leaves muscles untrained. Speaking your truth after years of quiet can feel unfamiliar, even frightening. But each time you choose honesty over appeasement, you strengthen that voice. Each time you honor your boundary, you remind yourself that safety begins within. Some will try to pull you back into silence using guilt. They will remind you of all they have done for you, all you owe them, all the ways you used to be easier. But growth is not ingratitude. Growth is not rebellion. Growth is the natural result of someone finally listening to themselves. You may also notice that your growth attracts misunderstanding. People who never asked how you felt will suddenly have opinions about how you should behave. People who ignored your needs will accuse you of ignoring theirs. This is not coincidence. It is resistance. Silence once kept the peace at the cost of your well-being. Growth prioritizes truth even when it creates discomfort. And discomfort is not danger. Discomfort is often the doorway to healthier dynamics, clearer expectations, and relationships that can withstand honesty. You do not have to argue with those offended by your growth. You do not have to justify every boundary or explain every decision. Growth is quiet confidence. It is choosing yourself without asking the room if it agrees. It is trusting that the people meant to walk with you will adjust their pace or step aside without demanding you slow down. There is a strange loneliness that can come with growth, not because you are alone, but because you are no longer surrounded by people who only knew how to relate to your silence. That space, though uncomfortable, is fertile. It allows room for connections that honor your voice, respect your limits, and celebrate your becoming. Your silence once kept you safe. Your growth keeps you whole. And those who benefited from the old version of you may never applaud the new one. They may never understand why you stopped shrinking, why you stopped explaining, why you stopped accepting less than you deserve. But understanding was never the requirement. Honesty was. As you continue to grow, remember that offense is not a signal to retreat. It is often a sign that something unhealthy has been disrupted. You are not responsible for soothing the discomfort of those who were comfortable while you were hurting. Your responsibility is to the life you are building, the truth you are learning to speak, the self you are finally choosing to stand beside instead of silencing again. Your intuition has always been speaking, long before you learned how to explain yourself, long before you gathered evidence, long before logic stepped in to negotiate what your spirit already knew. It is the quiet knowing that arrives without permission, the feeling in your chest that tightens or loosens before your mind catches up. It does not shout. It does not argue. It simply presents truth and waits to see whether you will honor it or betray it again. From an early age, many people are taught to doubt this inner voice. They are told to be polite instead of honest, agreeable instead of aware, logical instead of feeling. Over time, intuition is labeled dramatic, irrational, too sensitive. And so it retreats, not because it disappears, but because it learns it will not be listened to. Still it remains, recording every moment you override it, every time you say yes when something inside you says no. Your intuition does not need proof to exist. It operates beyond justification. It is built from lived experience, from patterns recognized subconsciously, from lessons absorbed quietly. It remembers how people made you feel even when your mind forgets. It notices shifts in energy before words change. It senses danger, misalignment, and truth without needing a meeting to discuss it. Giving your intuition the final vote means you stop asking everyone else what you should do before asking yourself how something feels. It means you stop collecting opinions to drown out your own knowing. Advice has value, but intuition has context. No one else lives in your body. No one else carries your history, your sensitivity, your thresholds. Outsourcing your decisions may feel safer, but it often leads you away from yourself. There were times you felt uneasy, but stayed anyway. Times you ignored the knot in your stomach because you did not want to seem difficult. Times you dismissed your discomfort as overthinking. Each time intuition noted the cost. Not to punish you, but to remember. And when similar situations appear, it speaks sooner, stronger, hoping you will listen this time. Intuition is not fear, though fear often disguises itself as intuition. Fear is loud, repetitive, urgent. Intuition is calm, steady, persistent. Fear says something terrible will happen. Intuition says something is not right. Learning the difference takes patience and self-honesty. It requires you to sit with yourself long enough to hear the tone beneath the message. When you ignore your intuition, you fracture trust with yourself. You teach your inner voice that it will be overruled. And when trust erodes internally, confusion grows. Decisions feel heavy. Regret lingers. You begin to doubt yourself not because you are incapable, but because you have abandoned your own counsel too many times. Honoring intuition is an act of self-respect. It is believing that your inner wisdom is valid even when it contradicts expectations, even when it disrupts plans, even when it disappoints others. Intuition rarely explains itself in ways that make everyone comfortable. It prioritizes alignment over approval. There is a reason your intuition reacts before your logic. Logic analyzes what already exists. Intuition senses what is forming. It reads between words. It notices inconsistencies. It pays attention to what is unsaid. It warns you not with panic, but with presence. A feeling that lingers. A hesitation that refuses to leave. Giving your intuition the final vote does not mean rejecting reason. It means allowing intuition to lead and logic to support. Logic helps you plan the steps. Intuition tells you which direction is true. When logic leads alone, it can justify staying in places that drain you. It can rationalize mistreatment. It can explain away discomfort. Intuition cuts through explanation and asks a simpler question. Does this honor who you are becoming? Many people regret not listening to their intuition sooner. They say they knew. They felt it. They ignored it. Rarely does anyone regret listening to it. Even when intuition leads to loss, that loss often makes space for peace. Even when it leads to endings, those endings prevent deeper harm. Your intuition strengthens with use. Each time you listen, it becomes clearer. Each time you honor it, your confidence grows. Not the kind that needs validation, but the kind that feels grounded. The kind that trusts its footing even on uncertain ground. There will be moments when intuition asks you to walk away without a dramatic reason. No betrayal, no explosion. Just a quiet knowing that something no longer fits. This can be hard to explain to others, and even harder to accept yourself. But intuition does not operate on explanations. It operates on alignment. Sometimes intuition asks you to rest when productivity says push harder. Sometimes it asks you to speak when silence feels safer. Sometimes it asks you to wait when urgency pressures you to decide. These moments test your willingness to trust yourself over momentum, over pressure, over fear of missing out. You may have been taught that intuition is unreliable, especially if you are emotional, empathetic, or sensitive. In truth, sensitivity is often the doorway to intuition. It allows you to pick up on subtleties others miss. It allows you to feel shifts before they are visible. It is not weakness. It is awareness. Listening to intuition also means accepting responsibility. You can no longer say you did not know. You can no longer hide behind confusion. Awareness removes excuses, and that can feel heavy, but it also removes regret. It gives you clarity even when outcomes are uncertain. Your intuition will not always choose the easiest path. It often chooses the honest one. It may ask you to leave comfort, familiarity, or illusion. It may ask you to sit alone rather than stay surrounded by people who do not see you. It may ask you to choose yourself in ways that feel unfamiliar. When you give your intuition the final vote, you stop living reactively. You stop chasing clarity outside yourself. You stop abandoning your inner voice to keep external peace. You begin to build a life that feels coherent, not perfect, but true. There will still be doubt. Intuition does not erase uncertainty. It provides direction within it. It offers a compass, not a map, and following a compass requires courage, because it asks you to trust where you are being led even when you cannot yet see the destination. Each time you listen, you return to yourself. Each time you ignore it, you drift. The choice is quiet, daily, often unnoticed, but over time it shapes everything. The relationships you keep, the work you pursue, the peace you allow. Your intuition has never asked you to be fearless. It has asked you to be honest. It has never demanded perfection. It has asked for presence. It waits patiently, without resentment, without judgment, ready to guide you the moment you decide that your inner knowing is worthy of trust, worthy of authority, worthy of being heard before the world votes on your life. A fulfilled life does not begin with achievement, recognition, or applause. It begins the moment you stop turning against yourself. Self-betrayal is subtle, not always loud or obvious, and often masquerades as patience, compromise, or understanding. It shows up in the decisions you make when you silence your truth to avoid conflict, in the times you say yes even as your heart trembles, in the moments when you sacrifice your comfort for acceptance. These choices accumulate quietly, and before you know it, your life feels heavy, misaligned, and distant from the joy you hoped for. You begin to wonder why fulfillment seems unattainable when, in truth, it has been waiting for you to honor yourself. Self-betrayal teaches you to doubt your own instincts and feelings. You learn to question your reactions instead of questioning the situations that provoke them. You tell yourself that you are too sensitive, too emotional, too demanding, when in reality you are responding accurately to what does not serve you. Over time, this habitual self-doubt erodes your confidence. The fracture it creates is internal, invisible, but deeply felt. The disconnect between who you are and how you allow yourself to be treated prevents fulfillment from taking root, because fulfillment thrives on alignment. Many people confuse endurance with fulfillment. They believe that a good life is one where you tolerate more, sacrifice more, and maintain composure at all costs. They equate patience with virtue. silence with strength, and accommodation with love. But endurance without alignment breeds resentment, exhaustion, and emptiness. You may have a life full of responsibilities and obligations, but still feel hollow inside. Fulfillment requires presence, conscious engagement, and honest participation in your own life, not mere survival. Self-betrayal often begins as a survival strategy. You learned early on that being agreeable kept you safe, that staying silent avoided conflict, that minimizing your own needs preserved connection. These strategies once served a purpose. They helped you belong, helped you navigate difficult relationships, helped you avoid harm. But what once protected you can later imprison you. The survival tools that allowed you to exist comfortably in others' terms eventually become barriers to living fully on your own. Fulfillment asks that you unlearn the patterns that no longer serve you. A fulfilled life requires self-loyalty. It asks you to honor your inner truth, even when it is inconvenient or uncomfortable. It asks you to recognize your limits and enforce them without shame. It asks you to stop offering explanations for why you deserve respect and space. Self-loyalty is the recognition that your inner voice has value, and that listening to it is not optional. The life you build around self-loyalty is a life rooted in alignment rather than appeasement, in honesty rather than pretense, and in presence rather than avoidance. Self-betrayal is evident in relationships where you minimize yourself to preserve connection. You stay in spaces that are shrinking rather than expanding. You accept behavior that hurts because confrontation feels risky. You override your own intuition repeatedly because others' expectations seem more urgent than your own needs. Each time you silence yourself, you teach your inner self that its needs are optional, that its voice does not matter. Fulfillment cannot grow in a soil where self-erasure has been cultivated for years. Fulfillment begins when you stop romanticizing suffering. You stop believing that pain is proof of love or proof of loyalty. You stop equating chaos with passion and endurance with virtue. You recognize that consistency, safety, and respect are not boring, they are nourishing. You see that a calm, stable life does not diminish your resilience, but strengthens your capacity to feel, create, and connect. Your nervous system, long overstretched and neglected, begins to recover when you stop glorifying discomfort and start honoring your limits. Many people seek fulfillment externally through validation, recognition, and accomplishments because they have learned to disconnect internally. They look outside for signs that they are enough, for achievements that prove value, for relationships that compensate for the lack of alignment within themselves. But no amount of external success can replace the inner coherence that comes from self-honesty and self-respect. Fulfillment is found within, in the quiet moments when your thoughts, feelings, and actions are no longer in conflict. Self-betrayal creates fragmentation. One part of you knows the truth, another part silences it. Over time, this division produces fatigue, emotional strain, and a persistent feeling of being off balance. You may rest physically, but the mind and heart remain exhausted. Fulfillment requires integration, the reunion of your inner self with your outward life, so that your choices reflect your values and your actions honor your feelings. The journey to a fulfilled life begins with awareness and commitment to this integration. Ending self-betrayal requires honesty. Honest acknowledgement of where you stayed silent when you should have spoken. Honest recognition of where you said yes despite discomfort. Honest reflection on relationships and circumstances that demanded your compromise. This honesty may feel heavy at first. It brings up regret, pain, and sometimes shame. Yet regret is not punishment, it is information. It is evidence of lessons learned and patterns recognized. Compassion toward yourself allows these lessons to translate into meaningful change. Self-loyalty does not demand perfection. You will stumble. You will hesitate. You may still override your instincts at times. The difference is that you begin to notice when you are about to betray yourself. You begin to pause, to reflect, and to choose differently. That pause changes everything. It creates room for intentional living, for decisions rooted in alignment rather than habit or fear. Fulfillment grows when you allow your needs to exist without apology, when you honor your desire for rest, peace, and boundaries without guilt, when you stop negotiating your well-being to avoid inconvenience or disapproval. You recognize that honoring yourself is not selfish, and that a life built on self-betrayal is empty no matter how much it looks like success on the outside. Many people fear that self-loyalty will make them selfish or lonely. But selfishness takes without regard. Self-loyalty respects both yourself and others, because it begins with clarity. When you are honest with yourself, your relationships become clearer. You give more fully from a place of abundance, not depletion. You connect not from fear or obligation, but from choice and alignment. Fulfillment comes from giving freely, not from sacrificing your essence. Ending self-betrayal transforms how you experience love and connection. You no longer confuse attachment with affection. You stop staying where love is conditional or where your presence is taken for granted. You stop chasing potential in others while ignoring what is real. Fulfillment is not dependent on being chosen. It is the result of consistently choosing yourself, honoring your boundaries, and listening to your inner voice. You begin to see how often you sought permission to exist fully. How often you waited for validation before trusting your own instincts. Ending self-betrayal means your approval of yourself matters more than any external recognition. Your inner voice gains authority. Your confidence grows from trust rather than from demonstration. Your peace develops as a natural consequence of honoring yourself consistently. Your intuition becomes sharper and louder when you stop silencing it. Your sense of self-worth strengthens each time you make a choice that reflects your values. Your energy stabilizes when you stop spending it on negotiating with people or circumstances that do not respect you. Fulfillment emerges as a result of consistent self-honoring, small choices repeated daily, building a life that aligns with who you are rather than who you were taught to be. A fulfilled life is not found in perfection. It is found in alignment, in the awareness that your choices, actions, and thoughts reflect your values, in the ability to rest without guilt, to speak your truth without fear, to enforce boundaries without apology, to leave situations that erode your well-being, to allow joy without qualification. This alignment is what transforms ordinary existence into a life that feels meaningful and coherent. The moment you stop betraying yourself is the moment you reclaim your life. Your decisions no longer come from fear or obligation, but from clarity. Your relationships shift from conditional to mutual. Your days take shape around priorities that serve your well-being. Your inner world and outer life begin to harmonize, producing a sense of coherence and fulfillment that was previously obscured by repeated compromises. When self-betrayal ends, you experience a profound sense of relief. The constant inner conflict that once drained your energy and clouded your perception begins to dissipate. You begin to recognize yourself in your own life, no longer as someone who merely survived, but as someone who has chosen consciously, who has learned to stand on their own side, who honors their needs as much as they honor others. Every choice becomes an opportunity to practice self-loyalty, and with each practice, fulfillment grows deeper and more rooted. You notice a shift in how you relate to time. No longer do you spend hours on obligations that do not serve your growth or joy. You prioritize what nourishes your spirit, what expands your mind, what brings peace to your body. You understand that your energy is finite, and fulfillment comes from allocating it wisely. You begin to see the difference between commitments that deplete and commitments that enrich, and you no longer confuse business with purpose. Ending self-betrayal also reshapes your relationship with others. You no longer tolerate manipulation, disrespect, or inconsistency in the name of connection. You recognize that mutual respect and alignment are non-negotiable for a meaningful bond. Relationships that once demanded compromise at the expense of your integrity either transform or dissolve. This is not loss, it is clarity. You are no longer available to patterns that once controlled you. And in that freedom, fulfillment takes root. A fulfilled life is a life lived in alignment with your own truth. It is a life where your choices, actions, and relationships reflect your values rather than societal expectations. It is a life where self-loyalty is the foundation for peace, joy, and growth. It is the quiet realization that you do not need to justify your existence to anyone, that your inner voice deserves to be heard before the world's opinions, and that choosing yourself consistently is not selfish, but essential for a life that feels whole.